Here they are, the stars of the show from the USA with beautiful sounds, the Beach Boys! Welcome back everybody for another Beach Boys album review. Today, to celebrate the 55th anniversary of the recording of the Beach Boys' Live in London album, I thought we'd take some time to dive into this album, talk about its production history, its track list, and kind of where the Beach Boys were back in 1968. So, the Beach Boys' initial live album, Beach Boys Concert from 1964, had been a huge success, going all the way to #1 on the charts, the first live album ever by any artist to do so. And the Beach Boys took a few years trying to figure out how they could follow up to this successful live document. There were attempts made back in 1965, 1966, and the Hawaii shows from 1967, but ultimately none of these reached the album stage of things. So despite the Beach Boys having a very good track record of performing live and going on big tours and whatnot, 1968 was proving to be a pretty rough year for the group. None of their albums that year were particularly successful. Their studio album, Friends, set an all-time low charting position for the group and was not particularly well received at the time. Today, of course, Friends has a big following, but not so much back then. Additionally, two other albums I've talked about on this channel, those being Best of the Beach Boys Volume 3 and the Bizarro Stacco Tracks album, both underperformed as well. You can check out my videos on those for more information. And it didn't seem like the Beach Boys had a whole lot of good prospects. The only thing, arguably, that was really working to their credit was a very successful single, especially in Europe, but somewhat in the US as well, called Do It Again, a callback to their surfing days. And indeed, Do It Again was their only major American success, and really the only thing that kept them afloat through all that time. But the group was much more popular in Europe than they were in their homeland, that kind of thing. And indeed, December of 1968, or starting in December of 1968, they went on an extensive European tour where they were very well received. So where does Live in London factor into all this? Well, Live in London was recorded in late 1968 at the Finsbury Park Astoria. We'll talk more about that later because there is some discrepancy based on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the correct answer. And most of their London shows are included at the end of this digital collection I'm holding up now, The Beach Boys on Tour 1968. This features several American shows and then ends with their shows in England. So let's talk a bit about these American shows to help kind of contextualize them a little bit before we get into Live in London, because that's after most of this material. So on these various American shows across their US tour, which was earlier in the year, the group played a lot of recognizable songs, and the group also tried to work in new stuff. Notably, the lead single from Friends, the song Friends, and its B-side, Little Bird. However, the group isn't particularly enthusiastic about doing these songs, and both Friends and Little Bird have jokes inserted into the songs. For example, during Friends, they talk about cutting off your hair. Dennis starts going snip, 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 snip. And for Little Bird, there's some jokes about it being Saturday and whatnot that are sung in like these silly opera voices. It's really weird. And additionally, in the banter leading up to these songs, Mike Love refers to Friends as a bomb. You can tell the Beach Boys weren't proud of this. They didn't really want to do it. Additionally, they have animosity against their very early songs, too. They do a quick medley. If you watch my video on the 1966 Ann Arbor concerts, they do a quick medley of all their early hits. And the audience goes nuts when they hear the opening to Surf and Safari, more so than for almost any other song in the set. But the Beach Boys just want to get through it. They rush through them as quick as they can. Mike Love dismisses them as oldies and moldies and whatnot. And you can tell the group doesn't want to associate with these older songs. They want to be seen for their new artistic achievements. So it's kind of weird. They're bad-mouthing their newest stuff and also bad-mouthing their oldest stuff. But honestly, the group sounds pretty tight. They begin touring with a bigger contingent of backing players, horns and things like that, to really kind of amp up the sounds of the songs. Indeed, all the American concerts feature a bonus band instrumental track where the Beach Boys leave and just the musicians play. They do kind of like a jam. It's really interesting, and the songs sound great. But you can tell the group was having trouble figuring out what they wanted to be and what their audience wanted. You know, they didn't want to do those old songs. They wanted to do the new stuff, but no one wanted the new stuff. They all wanted the oldies. So they were at kind of a confusing place. And this, coupled with 3 failed, or basically failed, albums in 1968, kind of spelled the end of the Beach Boys' reign as America's band. But England was much more receptive, and the last 3 shows of that digital set are all from the UK. There are 2 at the London Palladium on December the 1st, 1968. These shows were recorded but not used. According to BeachBoysGigs.com, the recordings couldn't be licensed out for a record release. There was some kind of international, I guess, negotiation issue. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. That prevented them from being used. They are recorded and they're both available in their entirety here. We'll come back to those and do some comparisons and things a little bit later, because they're very similar to the Live in London album with one major difference. And there's one show from Finsbury Park Astoria to close out this digital set. The other show from Finsbury Park became the Beach Boys' Live in London album. Now you might wonder why I'm holding up 2 different looking albums. I guess you could even argue there are 3 different looking albums, because Live in London has a complicated release history. So in 1970, the album was released with a cover, an alternate photo on the cover from the 2020 photo shoot. They're blurred in this picture. Some people call it the blurry cover. I don't have one with a cover like that. They're kind of hard to find compared to the other variants. But they did it with this cover, and it was only released in the UK and Europe. I can't imagine how it must have felt to be one of the Beach Boys and be told, yeah, your new record, that's not coming out in the US, it's only coming out overseas. Had to have been just the biggest kick in the head imaginable. In 1971, the album got reissued with a new cover, and this is the cover that's most associated with the album. In almost every publicity photo, in their concert films, on the inside of the CD case, this is the cover, this 1971 variant that is used. It has replaced the old blurry image cover and is widely seen as the de facto one. And there's a little section, my copy's from the Netherlands, I think. Little section for liner notes there, some ads, EMI stuff on the back. And it was not released in the US in 1970 or 1971. It wouldn't receive an American release until 1976, when the Beach Boys had their big comeback, 15 Big Ones, you know, riding the wake of Endless Summer. And it was given a new title and new cover art, as you see here. The new title, Beach Boys 69. Really, couldn't have come up with a better title. And on the back, it talks about these wonderful shows from the London Palladium, recorded in 1969. The problem with that is that these shows were not recorded at the London Palladium. They're from Finsbury Park, and they were recorded in 1968. So I have no idea where all this came from. But there are some decent liner notes there. And it is a fun cover. I just wish it had a different title and maybe something that was a little more reminiscent of the original European copy here. But talk about a weird release, you know, and to think about how the US had to wait so much longer for this album than the UK did. Now there is contention about the recording of it, but here are the liner notes from 1983's Beach Boys Rarities. We'll talk about why this is important a little bit later, but they even note the mistakes that were made in saying the year and recorded at the London Palladium. And this is further corroborated by the booklet to the CD, which weirdly enough says that they could have been recorded at the Palladium, but it's more likely they were recorded at Finsbury Park Astoria, which has a new name now, by the way. It's changed names several times. But it's kind of strange, they don't really commit in this booklet quite as much maybe as they should. Very odd. But the consensus seems to be not the Palladium, and certainly not in 1969. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll jump in a bit and talk about the track list. I'll actually show you the back of the CD this time. We have a really fun concert track list. Now, every Beach Boys live album is a little different, and a lot of them are trying to kind of promote new songs and whatnot, which is surprising because Live in London doesn't do that as much as you might think. So I'll hold up the 8-track for a while here. Start off with Darlin', makes for a great opener, and the band sounds terrific with a horn section backing them up. Carl's very soulful. Then we have 2 Pet Sound songs, Wouldn't It Be Nice and Sloop John B. The audience loves them. That kind of thing. Wouldn't It Be Nice? They're still doing the shorter version in concert. They won't start doing the full song for quite some time yet, but nonetheless, the audience apparently loves Pet Sounds. Remember, it was much more successful in England than the US, so they're into it. And that's great. California Girls, the audience, again, very receptive. They cheer a lot. Hold up something different for you. Seems to be working pretty well so far. Then we get Do It Again. That was their brand new single at the time. Now, Do It Again had been a #1 hit in the UK. It only went to about number 20 in the US, which for the time was still pretty good. And Do It Again, interestingly, since Brian Wilson is not on this album, they kind of use the horns to fill in for his vocals in some places, and it sounds really good. It's a very interesting approach. And Do It Again is such a great song. Again, the audience is kind of into it. And then we get something very unusual. Wake the World. Wake the World is the only song from Friends that the group doesn't openly seem to disparage. Mike Love does make a little joke at the beginning about how they're doing it in darkness and that kind of thing. Sometimes in some of those other shows, he adds in that, oh, the theater must not have paid their electric bill or something like that. But there's some gags there, like someone kisses the microphone and so on. But anyway, the song's done completely seriously, and it isn't treated lightly as Friends and Little Bird were. It's treated with some more respect. And I'm thinking because it was the B-side to such a successful song, it makes sense they'd take it a little more seriously and do it the right way instead of making a big gag out of it. So the only song from Friends and their newest, hottest single, certainly good choices there. And for a long time, until the release of this set, that was the only official live version of Wake the World that you could get. After Wake the World, we have Aren't You Glad from Wild Honey. I wore my Aren't You Glad t-shirt today. Until the release of 2017's Sunshine Tomorrow, that was the only official live version of Aren't You Glad that there was. The one on this set was recorded in 1970 at a show in Big Sur. And then we flip it over to get Bluebirds Over the Mountain, the only official live version for quite some time until those Palladium shows were released on that digital set. Very interesting. It sounds terrific. It's very propulsive with all these instruments and whatnot. Bluebirds Over the Mountain wasn't a huge success for the group, not as big as Do It Again. It would later be released on the 2020 album. I'm not sure if the single had been released just yet. If not, it was right on the cusp of its release. So something that was so new that the audience probably didn't know it yet. Even if they knew the Ursula Hickey original, they might not have known the Beach Boys version. Then we have Their Hearts Were Full of Spring, an a cappella song there. The Beach Boys were doing this live for their other shows on their 1968 concert tour. So very interesting to have it here on vinyl and whatnot. There are some studio versions that float around. There's a 1963 take, and there's the Late in Hawaii take, and whatnot. But nice to have it here, and they sound really good a cappella as well. Mike Love, of course, stopping to joke that a cappella means it's done nude. And the audience does think that's funny. Then we have Good Vibrations. This recording of Good Vibrations was released as the B-side much later to Rock and Roll to the Rescue. It's on the 12-inch single as well. This is also the version of Good Vibrations used in the Rock Band video games. So Good Vibrations, of course, the audience loves it. They go nuts for it. And who can blame them? It's a very good one. I should note that like the single release and stuff, they are edited. They take out a lot of the audience stuff and some of Mike Love's lines, things like that. They kind of shorten it down to just the song itself, not so much the concert context there. There's also on this big 1968 digital set the sound check from Good Vibrations, and that was released on the Endless Harmony soundtrack as well. The group kind of warming up and playing it before they actually go on. Really nice recording. And that's technically the last song of the show. Then they do 2 encores. They do God Only Knows, which is an odd choice for an encore, I think, but the audience loves it, and Carl sounds great on it, and he even gets a big build-up that it's his big number for the evening and whatnot. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And lastly, the audience perspiration number. Join the Beach Boys and sweat along to Ba 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 Barbara Ann, and I'll bet you that place was shaking when they were doing Barbara Ann, because the audience is really getting into it, and that's a good choice for a big closer to just go nuts and have everybody jamming out to Barbara Ann. Now, over the years, there have been outtakes and bonus tracks released, and here's kind of where the London Palladium shows come in, as well as a video I did a couple weeks ago on Late in Hawaii, or I should say the actual Hawaii concerts, not the Late in Hawaii studio stuff. On the CD, where it was teamed up with Beach Boys Concert, the bonus track for Live in London was Heroes and Villains. They did not do that, I think, on their British tour at all. Instead, that is the version of Heroes and Villains from Hawaii. You can watch my Live Sunshine / Late in Hawaii videos, and we'll talk more about that. Interesting. And maybe it was included as the bonus track to get some Brian Wilson in there, since he's not on the actual album. But it doesn't really fit with the rest of the concert because it's done in a much different style. So, I don't know, an odd choice for a live bonus track. But as they basically released the whole show on vinyl, remember the Beach Boys were the closing of several acts, so the concert had already been going on for a while. You might wonder, what could they have included that would have been a little more accurate? Was there actually an outtake from London or from Finsbury Park that they could have used? And the answer is All I Want to Do. So All I Want to Do, Live in London, was released on the Beach Boys Rarities album. Here's the insert there, the liner notes for you. That is actually an outtake from the London Palladium shows. So the shows they'd done December the 1st instead of December the 8th. And on those London Palladium shows, they used All I Want to Do as the big closer. The version on Beach Boys Rarities is only about 1.5 minutes. It's not even quite the full song, which is strange. Later releases, such as the 2 Palladium shows on here, they do have the full song. It's very interesting. Now, All I Want to Do is the Beach Boys' most sexual song, certainly the most sexually explicit. It's not the only one to be about sex, but I can kind of see why All I Want to Do didn't catch on, because we don't often think of the Beach Boys as an R-rated band. And yeah, it's a little bit strange in that regard to do that, because there could have been children present. I do like All I Want to Do just because it's so unique. It's kind of the Beach Boys version of Helter Skelter, is also what I call it. But it's interesting here. And it could have very well been, I think, a bonus track on this CD, but they opted not to go that route. So it was released on Rarities in 1983 in an abridged form. A longer version was later included on Made in California, and then finally we get both the actual takes here. Interestingly, I believe everyone uses the first show take, because the second show take, Mike Love says during the song, yeah, we don't know all the words to this one yet. But if you're ever curious about All I Want to Do, you can look it up. Remember, not the same as All I Want to Do from Sunflower. Much different song, different vibes there. And there we have the second show from Finsbury Park Astoria on December the 8th, 1968, almost 55 years ago to the day, for Beach Boys Live in London, aka Beach Boys 69. So the first show you can find in its entirety here, and that second show became the Live in London album. So what are your thoughts on this live album or other Beach Boys live albums? Please put them down below and join me for some Christmas stuff, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.